that is in number 3. I always wanted to write a story about a demon who has to collect souls. And this came from a really long time ago. It was, I think, about 25 years ago or something. I read this story about the Books of Blood by Clive Barker, and I absolutely loved those short stories, which is, one of the reasons why I wanted to write as one of my first steps into fiction, a collection of short stories. The Books of Blood were an amazingly well-written series of short stories, and kind of, it propulsed Clive Barker onto the writing scene and started his career. And one of those short stories was kind of special because it was so different from all the other ones. The other ones were dark, bleak, and horror, and really bad. And then there was one called The Yattering and Jack. The Yattering and Jack is a little bit special in that it's one of the few times where Mr. Barker actually has a lot of humor in his stories, which is pretty rare for him. And I've read pretty much every book he's written. And in The Yattering and Jack is basically about a demon, the Yattering, who has to collect the soul of Jack, a guy he has to live in his house with, and he can't get away, and he's getting depressed because he's not succeeding. He's kind of a loser. And I'm not going to spoil the story for you. You need to read the book, and I'll put a link on the research page to that one. But it was just that story, stuck with me. I read it and reread it and enjoyed it a lot. There was actually in the TV series where they made that. It was some sort of like Tales from the Crypt-like TV show. I can't remember which one it is. I'll look it up and I'll put it on the research page if I find it. And that adaptation for TV didn't really work all that well. It wasn't really great. There's a whole lot, the story is a whole lot better written by Clive Barker. So read it first, if anything, and perhaps afterwards, if you can watch that TV show, brace yourself for some really bad 80s kind of TV show extravaganza, let's put it that way. Anyway, back to the story. For well over a decade, I had this idea in mind, like, if I ever write fiction, I want to write something about a demon who has to collect souls. But for various reasons, I never got to fiction until I was in my 40s. But that idea never went away. And then a couple of years ago, it's 2014 now, a couple of years ago, I read the Roy the Demon short stories by Steve Perry. Steve Perry, who I knew about via the Net Force books that he wrote a long time ago. I enjoyed those a lot because of that martial arts in them, Pencak Silat, which I was studying at the time. And by accident I stumbled upon his short stories about Roy the Demon, who was the gatekeeper of hell. And they were very funny and a lot of fun to read too as well. To read as well, and that kind of triggered the whole thing again for me. Like, you know what? Maybe it's time to start writing my own story. And that's when I started doing research. I initially had this whole idea of making this whole bunch of short stories or short novels, where I had this demon who was pretty much a loser, just like the Yattering and Jack in Mr. Barker's books, and basically he would each story get a little bit better and climb the ranks of hell until he would become the ruler. And I started researching that, and then it turns out that there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can find out about online about demons. For instance, there's these grimoires, these old books from the 1600s and so on, where people describe what hell looked like, the whole hierarchy, names for the demons, their rank, what their specialty was, and so on. It's hilarious if you read it now. So again, I'll put up a link for that. And I looked up some of the stuff that was written there, and one of the demons that they described was Morax, and he seemed to be an interesting guy, so I started with him, and that was the first part of doing some research and basically getting him started. And I had this whole thing planned where I would make him go through all these adventures so he would eventually get stronger and better and take gruesome revenge on all the people who mocked him or basically hurt him. but he didn't connect with me as a character. I mean, sure, he was an evil bastard because he's a demon, but it didn't connect with me for some reason. I couldn't really make it work. He's a bit of a loser, and making a character like that likable, so you want to keep on reading about him. It's not that easy. You typically don't want to read books about this loser guy. Even an anti-hero is different than just a loser. So either he couldn't be a loser, which would be difficult for me to do what I wanted to do, or I had to find a way to make him interesting, and I really didn't feel like spending the time and the energy on doing that because I didn't enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy writing about it, typically you won't enjoy reading about it. So I'd written a bunch of stories, the intro for Mrs. Scurry, the ending, I'd written that, a bit of a middle part. Had this fun scene where Morax is torturing one of his familiars. You can look that up also. And doing fun stuff. I might actually use that scene sooner or later. It's something else. So I had a lot of fun with that part, but it didn't click. I couldn't make it work. So I scrapped it for parts and kept some of it. And when I eventually had this click on writing Deadly Sin number 3, that's when the story went really fast. So bringing it back to the title, the title is a reference to the 7 Deadly Sins. And when I finished writing the story and was looking for a title, I kind of took a step back and what is the real reason Mrs. Scurry is doomed to burn in the pits of hell, to put it that way, is greed. When I looked up the 7 Deadly Sins, I saw that greed was very often listed as the 3rd deadly sin, so hence the title Deadly Sin number 3. Mrs. Scurry herself, she came to life after encounters with an elderly woman who kind of made my life miserable a little bit. And obviously in real life you can't do a lot of bad things to people, but in writing you can. So it was kind of a cathartic experience for me to base part of Mrs. Scurry on her and get my revenge that way. So that was just checking through my notes here. That was a little bit of fun, and also it's one of the few stories where I'm going away from this whole, you have to feel for the protagonist, you have to have a connection with the protagonist, so it's more powerful an impact when I actually kill him off or give him his horrible fate. With Mrs. Scurry, it's the opposite. I wanted you to feel that she gets what she deserves, and I want you to have the same kind of feeling you have for the assholes and the obnoxious people in your life. Is when they have something bad happen to them, you go like, yeah, right on. You've got this coming. Which, if I manage to do that, says a lot about you as a person, more than it does about me as the writer. So maybe that's a true horrible ending. So who knows? Bringing it back to the story, the Enron thing. That came about after watching 2 documentaries quickly in a row by accident. One of them is called The Smartest Guys in the Room, which is about the Enron scandal. And another one was about the whole, basically the worldwide economical crisis we had, 2008, 2009. What went behind the scene? What went on behind the scenes, so that could happen, and basically a closer look at banking and at big financial institutions. One of the things that they mentioned there was how algorithms played a big part, computers played a big part, who are actually, a lot of the financial firms are located really close to Wall Street, so that the computers that they have, who do automatic buying and selling, that they have just milliseconds of an advance on others, so that during those fractions of seconds, there's just an enormous amount of transactions that take place, and that allows them, if they can beat somebody else by half a second, that allows them to make incredible gains and just a lot of billions of dollars that are moved around that way. I wanted to do something with that, but that didn't work out, so I kept the whole Enron thing, and everything else flowed from there. Final thing that I want to mention is just a couple of, let's call them Easter eggs that I planned in there. If you speak Latin, I studied Latin in high school, and some of it stuck with me. How Howard McMallum, some more actors firms called Lux, Bear and Partners. Lux, it means light in Latin, and bear, obviously you've got the animal, but to bear is to bring forth, or and so on. This is a reference to Lucifer. Lucifer means the bringer of light. It comes from lux and fere, which means to bear, to bring forth. So that was a reference, which basically, if you still have some of the Latin left in you, you might have caught that one. The other one is Howard McMallum, is basically a construct. Howard is a reference to H.P. Lovecraft, who's basically, the godfather of the whole genre, in my mind. And Mac is son of, Malum means evil, so you have Howard, the son of evil. This is this kind of stuff that I really enjoy, and I put in there. Why? Well, a long time ago I started reading the Discworld novels by Terry Pratchett, and he's a master of putting all these multiple layers of meaning and double entendres and just jokes in there. I remember reading my first Discworld novel, which was The Fifth Elephant, and there was this whole thing about the word hereditary. And there was a joke there, and then in the footnotes he made another joke, and in the footnote of the footnote there was another one. So you got these three levels of humor going on, and the last one was a mention about this offhand remark about fruit flies and garden peas. And I laughed real hard, because I remembered from a test that I had to do in high school for biology, and that test was basically give me the Latin names of fruit flies, of the fruit fly and the garden pea, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Drosophila melanogaster and Pia sativa. I still remember after over 20 years. And we had to study that, because in biology we'd learned that hereditary traits were studied at first, I think it was Yugoslavian monks, I'm not sure anymore, who did that by using garden peas and fruit flies. And Mr. Pratchett made a reference to that, and just stuck in my mind that was a really elegant way of making a reader, giving him a joke, making it funny, and if you can add an extra layer to that, it might give somebody else another joke. And the first one who missed that second part, the first reader who misses that second part, it doesn't hurt him at all. It's just something extra that you can give as a writer, and I'm by far not as adept at that than Mr. Pratchett is, because he's the master of that, and I don't think anybody can come close. That bar is set pretty high, but I enjoy doing that, so you might find a couple more ones in other stories as well. So all that said, that was Deadly Sin number 3. Hope you enjoyed it. I had a blast writing it, a lot of fun, and I'll see you in the other videos.